May 15, 1967, Con Thien, Republic of Vietnam. The temperature is 38 degrees Celsius. The humidity is 90%, thick enough that you can barely breathe, thick enough that your uniform never dries, thick enough that fungus grows on everything, including the skin between your fingers. Staff Sergeant Carlos Hathcock lies in a position he has occupied for 14 hours, approximately 15 meters inside enemy territory, in vegetation so dense that visibility extends barely 3 meters in any direction. He is wearing a ghillie suit covered in local vegetation that makes him indistinguishable from the jungle floor. His face is painted green and brown. His breathing is so shallow it's barely perceptible. In his hands is a Winchester Model 70 with an 8-IDEX Unertl scope, a match-grade rifle that he has modified extensively and that he trusts with his life. Approximately 200 meters ahead, on a trail that intelligence has identified as a major North Vietnamese army supply route, enemy soldiers are moving with impunity. They are laughing, talking, smoking, confident that they are deep in territory they control. They have no idea that an American sniper has crawled through their security perimeter, has positioned himself between their rear area and their front lines, and is now hunting them from inside what they believe is their safe zone. Every tactical manual says the same thing. Snipers operate from secure positions behind friendly lines, engaging enemy targets at range, then extracting to safety. You do not position yourself in enemy territory. You do not place yourself between the enemy and their escape routes. You do not hunt from inside their perimeter where you can be surrounded, where extraction is impossible, where one mistake means capture, torture, and death. But Carlos Hathcock understood something that the manual writers did not. The safest place to hide is not behind your own lines where the enemy expects you to be. The safest place is inside enemy lines where they never think to look. And the deadliest hunting ground is not where you can see the enemy coming, but where you can see them relaxing, believing themselves safe. Over the next 5 days, from this position and 3 others like it, that he would painstakingly establish deep in NVA-controlled territory, Hathcock would achieve 93 confirmed kills, not 93 kills claimed, 93 confirmed by his spotter or by other witnesses, each one documented, each one verified, in 5 days. That's 18 to 19 kills per day, a rate of lethality that exceeded entire sniper platoons. The North Vietnamese Army, realizing they had a ghost hunting them from inside their own lines, assigned an entire company, over 100 soldiers, specifically to find and kill him. They offered a bounty of $30,000, an astronomical sum, for his death or capture. They deployed counter-sniper teams, tracker dogs, systematic sweeps, and they failed, because Hathcock had developed a technique, a hiding trick so simple and so insane that when he tried to explain it to his commanding officer afterward, the officer banned him from ever doing it again. He called it reverse positioning. His fellow Marines called it Hathcock's suicide crawl. Military historians would later call it one of the most audacious sniper tactics ever employed in combat, a technique that should have gotten him killed, but instead made him the most feared American sniper in Vietnam. How does one Marine, alone except for his spotter, crawl into enemy territory and kill 93 soldiers in 5 days without being detected or killed? What was the hiding trick that allowed him to remain invisible while positioned in the worst possible tactical location? And what was the combination of skill, patience, and calculated insanity that turned this mission into a legend that the North Vietnamese Army would remember for decades? This is the story of the man who hunted from inside, the Tiger's Den, the reverse positioning technique that defied every tactical doctrine, and the 5 days that proved sometimes the craziest position is the safest position, and sometimes the best place to hide is exactly where the enemy knows you cannot be. While Carlos Hathcock was growing up in Little Rock, Arkansas during the 1950s, the world was experiencing the early stages of the Cold War conflicts that would eventually bring him to the jungles of Vietnam. After World War II, Vietnam had been occupied by France, attempting to reclaim its colonial possession. The Vietnamese independence movement, led by Ho Chi Minh and his communist Viet Minh forces, fought a guerrilla war that culminated in the devastating French defeat at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. The Geneva Accords divided Vietnam into North and South, with the communist government controlling the North and a Western-backed government controlling the South. By the early 1960s, communist insurgents in South Vietnam, the Viet Cong, backed by the North Vietnamese Army, were waging a guerrilla campaign to reunify the country under communist control. The United States, fearing the spread of communism throughout Southeast Asia, began deploying military advisors and then combat troops. By 1967, over 400,000 American troops were in Vietnam, fighting a war that had no front lines, no clear objectives, and an enemy that melted into the population and the jungle. Carlos Hathcock enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in 1959 at age 17. He did not join to fight communism or for patriotic rhetoric. He joined because his family was poor, because opportunities in Arkansas were limited, and because he had spent his childhood hunting in the woods and had developed a skill with a rifle that bordered on supernatural. He arrived at Marine Corps boot camp at Parris Island with one distinguishing characteristic: he could shoot. In qualification, he scored expert marksman ratings that caught the attention of his instructors. After infantry training, he was assigned to military police duty, then to competitive shooting, where he represented the Marine Corps in shooting competitions and won multiple championships. But Hathcock wanted combat. He volunteered for deployment to Vietnam in 1966 and was assigned to 1st Marine Division. His marksmanship reputation preceded him, and he was immediately selected for Scout Sniper training. The Marine Corps Sniper program in 1966 was still evolving, learning lessons from World War II and Korea, but adapting them to the unique challenges of jungle warfare against an enemy that used guerrilla tactics. The instructors at sniper school saw immediately what kind of Marine they had. Hathcock was patient beyond normal human tolerance. He could remain motionless for hours. He understood fieldcraft instinctively: how to read terrain, how to use vegetation for concealment, how to move without creating disturbance. His shooting was exceptional, but his real gift was his hunter's mindset. He did not think like a soldier. He thought like a predator. But with this predator mindset came a dangerous obsession. Hathcock did not just want to kill enemy soldiers. He wanted to hunt them perfectly, to stalk them to the point where they never knew he existed until they were dead. This meant getting close, often dangerously close, often violating the doctrinal standoff distances that kept snipers safe. During a training exercise, Hathcock's instructor presented a scenario. Enemy forces control a village, and you need to observe their movements and engage high-value targets. The approved solution was to position on high ground outside the village at 600 to 800 meters, use terrain for concealment, engage targets as they presented themselves. Hathcock proposed a different solution: infiltrate into the village at night, position inside an abandoned building or underground in vegetation, observe from inside the enemy perimeter, engage at close range when targets presented themselves, then exfiltrate through the same route. The instructor's response was immediate and harsh. "That's not sniping. That's suicide. You position in enemy territory, you're going to be captured and killed. We do not teach tactics that get Marines killed." Hathcock nodded, but he did not stop thinking about it, because he understood something from his hunting experience. Deer are most alert at the edge of the forest where they expect danger. In the center of their territory, they relax. The same principle applied to humans. Soldiers are alert at the perimeter, vigilant where they expect enemies. Deep in their own territory, they relax, they assume safety, they make mistakes. Captain Edward James Land was the officer who established and commanded the Marine Corps sniper program in Vietnam. Land was a visionary who understood that snipers in Vietnam needed to operate differently than snipers in conventional warfare. The jungle environment, the guerrilla tactics, the lack of front lines all demanded innovation. When Hathcock arrived in Vietnam and was assigned to Land's newly formed sniper platoon at Hill 55 near Da Nang, Land immediately recognized Hathcock's extraordinary skills, but he also recognized the dangerous independence in how Hathcock approached missions. During their first briefing, Land was explicit about his concerns. "Hathcock, your job is to kill enemy soldiers and gather intelligence while keeping yourself alive to continue killing enemy soldiers. You are worth more to the Marine Corps alive and operational than dead and heroic. Do not take unnecessary risks. Do not position yourself where extraction is impossible. Is that clear?" Hathcock's response was carefully worded. "Sir, I understand. I will not take unnecessary risks." Land, a perceptive officer who had commanded Marines in combat before, caught the qualifier. Not unnecessary risks, but calculated risks that Hathcock deemed necessary. Those were apparently still on the table. Land wrote in his log, Sergeant Hathcock has the potential to be either the most effective sniper in this war, or the first sniper to get himself killed doing something brilliant but suicidal. I cannot yet predict which. I can only prepare him as best as possible and trust his judgment in the field. Land had no idea that within months, Hathcock would do both, achieve effectiveness that exceeded every other sniper in theater, while simultaneously executing missions that should have gotten him killed multiple times. By May 1967, Staff Sergeant Carlos Hathcock had been in Vietnam for nearly a year. He had 42 confirmed kills, making him already one of the most effective snipers in the Marine Corps. But he was frustrated. The NVA and Viet Cong had adapted to American sniper tactics. They moved at night, used dense jungle for concealment, avoided open areas during daylight. Finding targets was becoming increasingly difficult. Intelligence reported that a major NVA supply route ran through the jungle near Con Thien, close to the demilitarized zone that separated North and South Vietnam. The NVA was using this route to move troops, weapons, and supplies to forward positions. They operated with relative impunity because the jungle was so dense that observation from aircraft or distant positions was nearly impossible. The enemy he would face were not poorly trained insurgents. The NVA soldiers operating near Con Thien were regular army, many of them veterans of years of warfare against the French and then the Americans. They were disciplined, well armed with AK-47s and SKS rifles, and they understood jungle warfare better than any American force. They used tunnels, spider holes, and interconnected bunker systems that made them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. Their security procedures were sophisticated. They posted sentries, used roving patrols, employed noise discipline, and maintained light discipline at night. They were alert to the threat of American snipers and had developed counter tactics. Move in groups, vary routes and timing, use dense cover, never expose themselves unnecessarily. On paper, an American sniper attempting to engage these forces faced nearly impossible odds. The jungle limited visibility to tens of meters. The enemy moved on their schedule through terrain they knew intimately. They had numerical superiority and could quickly concentrate forces to hunt down any threat they detected. Standard Marine sniper doctrine called for positioning in secure areas with good visibility, typically on elevated terrain, engaging targets at 400 to 800 meters, then extracting after a limited number of shots to avoid counterfire. This doctrine worked in open terrain, but was nearly useless in triple canopy jungle where you could not see 400 meters and where elevated positions did not exist. Hathcock had an idea. It violated every principle of sniper employment. It was so dangerous that if he proposed it formally, it would be rejected immediately. But he believed it would work. He shared it with his spotter, Corporal John Burke, who had worked with Hathcock for 6 months and trusted his judgment even when that judgment seemed insane. We're going to position inside their territory, not at the edge, inside, between their rear areas and their front lines. We'll crawl in at night, establish hide positions in the vegetation along their trails, and engage them as they move through. Burke's first response was the obvious one. That's suicide. They'll surround us. We'll have no extraction route. If they detect us, we're dead. Hathcock's counter was carefully reasoned. They won't detect us if we do it right. They're not looking for threats inside their own perimeter. They're looking outward toward our lines. We position in the center of their security. We become invisible because we're in the last place they expect us to be. Burke considered this. The logic was sound in a terrifying way, but the risk was enormous. If you're wrong, if they find us, we're not just killed, we're captured. You know what they do to captured snipers. Hathcock knew. The NVA had a particular hatred for American snipers. Captured snipers were tortured for information and as punishment, then executed. It was not a clean death. Then we make sure they don't find us. His primary weapon was the Winchester Model 70 target rifle chambered in .30-06 Springfield, fitted with an 8-power unertl scope. This was not a standard military issue rifle. It was a match-grade target rifle that Hathcock had extensively modified for precision shooting. The rifle weighed 6 kilograms, had a 610mm barrel, and was accurate to sub-MOA, minute of angle, precision in Hathcock's hands, meaning he could consistently hit a 1-inch circle at 100 yards. The .30-06 Springfield cartridge fired a 168-grain Sierra Match King boat-tail hollow point bullet at approximately 850 meters per second. This gave it excellent accuracy and terminal performance out to 800 meters. The inertl scope was a target-grade optic with extremely clear glass and precise adjustments. Though it lacked the ruggedness of military scopes and required careful handling, Hathcock had made several modifications to the rifle. He had adjusted the trigger to a crisp 680-gram pull weight, significantly lighter than military specifications, but perfect for precision shooting. He had hand-loaded his ammunition to exact specifications, ensuring consistent velocity and accuracy. He had bedded the action into the stock for maximum stability. The rifle was effectively a custom precision instrument built for one purpose, putting bullets exactly where Hathcock wanted them. But for this mission, the rifle was only part of his system. The other part was the ghillie suit and his fieldcraft techniques. A ghillie suit is a camouflage garment covered in strips of burlap or fabric that break up the human silhouette and allow the wearer to blend into vegetation. Hathcock's ghillie suit was a work of art, constructed over months, with burlap strips in various shades of green and brown attached to a base uniform. Before each mission, he would add local vegetation, leaves, grass, small branches, to make the suit blend perfectly with the specific terrain he would operate in. But the suit was only effective if the wearer understood how to use it. Hathcock had studied animal camouflage, how predators blend into environments not just through color, but through stillness, through positioning, through understanding what the prey's eye expects to see. He had developed a movement technique that he called slow crawl, where he would move so slowly that the movement itself was imperceptible to observers. He could cover 15 meters in 3 hours, moving millimeters at a time, never creating the sudden motion that catches the human eye. His hide position technique was equally refined. He would not simply lie in vegetation. He would become part of the vegetation, positioning himself so that his body was integrated into the natural shapes around him, so that even someone looking directly at him would see only jungle floor. He understood shadow and light, how to position so that his form never created an unnatural shadow, how to use existing vegetation as both concealment and a screen that made observation of his position difficult. This combination of equipment, technique, and preternatural patience was what would allow him to execute his impossible mission. In the 3 days before the mission began, Hathcock watched, he learned, and he calculated. He studied aerial photographs of the area, identifying the trail network, the likely security positions, the vegetation density. He interviewed patrols that had operated in the area, gathering intelligence on NVA movement patterns, timing, security procedures. He studied the terrain elevation, the water sources, the prevailing winds. He developed his plan. He would insert at night, moving through gaps in the NVA security perimeter that he identified from patrol reports. He would establish not one but multiple hide positions along the trail network, moving between them over several days. Each position would be carefully prepared, with planned emergency escape routes that led deeper into the jungle rather than back toward marine lines, because the NVA would expect an American sniper to flee toward his own forces. His doctrine for this mission was built on principles that violated every conventional sniper tactic. 1. Position inside the enemy perimeter, not outside. The enemy expects threats from outside. Their security faces outward. Inside their perimeter, they relax, they assume safety. That assumption is the vulnerability to exploit. 2. Move toward the enemy when discovered, not away. If the NVA detected a sniper, they would establish blocking positions between the sniper and marine lines, then sweep toward marine lines to catch the sniper retreating. By moving deeper into NVA territory instead, Hathcock would evade the blocking positions and the sweep, hiding in areas they had already cleared. 3. Engage at close range, not long range. Conventional sniper doctrine emphasized long-range engagement to maximize safety and make counterfire difficult. But long-range shots had lower hit probability and higher detection risk because they required multiple shots for correction. At close range, 150 to 300 meters, Hathcock could achieve first-shot kills with minimal detection. 4. Extended operations from hide positions. Conventional doctrine called for engaging targets and then immediately relocating. But relocation created movement, and movement was the most detectable signature. Hathcock would establish positions and remain in them for 12 to 24 hours, engaging multiple targets from the same position, because absolute stillness was more protective than displacement. 5. The reverse positioning principle. This was his core innovation. Position yourself not where you can see the enemy coming toward you, but where you can see them after they have passed their security perimeter, when they believe they are safe, when their guard is down. Shoot them in the back if necessary. There was no honor in war. There was only killing the enemy before he killed Marines. Captain Land reviewed Hathcock's mission plan with deep concern. Hathcock had outlined the objectives: kill enemy soldiers using the identified trail network, but had deliberately left the tactical details vague because he knew Land would reject the plan if he understood what Hathcock intended to do. Land's guidance was clear: operate for no more than 48 hours. Do not position yourself where extraction is impossible. If you make contact with superior forces, break contact and return to base. Your life is worth more than any number of confirmed kills. Understood? Hathcock responded, "Understood, sir." What Hathcock understood was that he was going to violate every one of those guidelines because they were incompatible with the mission as he envisioned it. He would operate for as long as the mission required. He would position himself where extraction was theoretically impossible, but where the enemy would never think to look. And if he made contact with superior forces, he would hide rather than flee, because fleeing would get him killed. He shared none of this with Captain Land because Land would have prohibited the mission. Sometimes, Hathcock had learned, it was better to ask forgiveness than permission. May 15, 1967, 2130 hours. Hathcock and Burke began their infiltration. They moved through the perimeter of Marine defensive positions at Con Tien into the jungle toward NVA territory. They carried minimal equipment: rifles, ammunition, water, a small amount of food, no radio because radio transmissions could be detected by NVA signals intelligence. They moved using Hathcock's slow crawl technique, covering perhaps 200 meters per hour. Every sound was analyzed before they moved. Every position was checked for enemy presence before they entered it. They moved not on trails, but through the thickest vegetation, where movement was hardest, but where they were least likely to encounter enemy patrols. It took them 6 hours to cover the 200 meters to Hathcock's planned first hide position. They arrived at 0330 hours, 3 hours before dawn. Hathcock selected a position in dense vegetation approximately 30 meters from a trail that intelligence had identified as an NVA supply route. The vegetation was thick enough that visibility was less than 5 meters. The position had slight elevation, perhaps 1 meter above the trail, enough to give a better angle, but not enough to be noticeable. They spent the remaining 3 hours before dawn preparing the hide. Hathcock did not dig a pit, which would create displaced soil and an unnatural depression. Instead, he arranged existing vegetation to create a shallow space where he and Burke could lie prone. He added vegetation to his ghillie suit, ensuring it matched the immediate surroundings perfectly. He cleared a narrow lane of fire toward the trail, removing individual leaves and small branches that might deflect his bullet, but leaving the overall vegetation intact so the lane was invisible from the trail. He positioned his rifle, checking that the muzzle was recessed into vegetation so that muzzle flash and blast would be partially concealed. He established a shooting position where he could remain for hours without movement, and then he and Burke settled in and became part of the jungle. At a 6:30 hours, as dawn light filtered through the triple canopy, they heard voices, Vietnamese, multiple speakers, moving down the trail. Hathcock did not move. He watched through his scope as 5 NVA soldiers walked past his position, approximately 30 meters away. They were carrying AK-47s, wearing the distinctive pith helmets of NVA regulars. They were talking, relaxed, clearly in territory they considered secure. Hathcock let them pass. 5 targets was too many. If he engaged, the survivors would return fire or flee and report the contact. He needed isolated targets or small groups that he could eliminate completely before they could react or report. At 0745 hours, a single NVA soldier walked down the trail. He was smoking a cigarette, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He was alone, vulnerable, perfect. Hathcock centered the crosshairs on the soldier's chest. Range approximately 200 meters. Minimal wind. Slight downward angle. The corrections were simple. He controlled his breathing, slowed his heart rate, pressed the trigger. The Winchester roared, the sound slightly muffled by the surrounding vegetation, but still shockingly loud in the quiet jungle. The 168-grain bullet struck the NVA soldier center mass. He dropped instantly, dead before his body hit the ground. Hathcock cycled the bolt, chambering another round, and scanned for threats. Nothing. The jungle was silent except for the normal sounds of birds and insects, which had momentarily stopped at the gunshot, but were already resuming. Burke, watching through his spotting scope, whispered, "One confirmed. No reaction from enemy positions. I think we're clear. Hathcock did not respond. He remained in position, motionless, waiting. His prediction was that NVA forces in the area had heard the shot but could not pinpoint its direction because of how the jungle distorted sound. They would be alert but would not immediately investigate a single shot, which could have been an accidental discharge or a soldier shooting at an animal. He was correct. Over the next hour, they heard increased activity on the trail, voices calling, but no one approached their position. The NVA was conducting a security check but had not identified the threat location. At 09:15 hours, 3 NVA soldiers appeared on the trail. They were moving cautiously, alert, scanning the jungle. They had clearly been sent to investigate the earlier shot. They were approximately 175 meters from Hathcock's position. This was the decision point. Engage 3 alert soldiers who would immediately return fire and call for help, or let them pass and wait for better opportunities. Hathcock made a calculation. The 3 soldiers were moving as a group, within a 5-meter spread. If he engaged the lead soldier first, the others would take approximately 2 seconds to react, locate the threat, and return fire. In 2 seconds, he could cycle his bolt and acquire a second target. The 3rd soldier would likely flee or go to ground. He decided to engage lead soldier first. The crosshairs settled on the man's chest. The trigger pressed. The bullet struck. The soldier dropped. Hathcock cycled the bolt in 0.7 seconds, a speed that came from thousands of repetitions. The 2nd soldier was turning toward the sound, raising his rifle. Hathcock's crosshairs found him. Trigger press. The bullet struck the soldier in the side as he turned. He fell. The 3rd soldier dove for cover, disappearing into vegetation beside the trail. Hathcock held his position, rifle aimed at where the soldier had disappeared. Seconds passed. The soldier emerged slightly, trying to see where the shots had come from. Hathcock fired. The bullet struck the soldier in the head. He collapsed. 3 targets, 3 kills. Elapsed time approximately 5 seconds from first shot to 3rd. Burke was scanning with his spotting scope, looking for additional threats. Clear. No movement, but they're going to react to this. 3 dead in 1 location. They'll investigate. Hathcock agreed, but his analysis was different from what Burke expected. They'll investigate, but they'll expect the shooter to have already relocated. Standard sniper doctrine is shoot and move. We're going to violate that. We're staying here. Burke looked at him. That's insane. They'll sweep this area. They'll sweep the area expecting to find an extraction route. They'll look for disturbed vegetation, for trails leading away. We're not leaving a trail because we're not leaving. We're going to be invisible because we're going to be exactly where they don't expect anyone to be. Right here, where the shooting happened. It was insane. It was also brilliant. The NVA would search for a sniper who had fled. They would not expect a sniper to remain in position 30 meters from where he had just killed 3 of their soldiers. Over the next 2 hours, Hathcock and Burke remained absolutely motionless as NVA soldiers swept the area. They could hear voices, could hear soldiers moving through the jungle, could hear commands being shouted. At one point, an NVA soldier walked within 10 meters of their position, scanning the jungle, looking for disturbance. The soldier looked directly at Hathcock's position. His eyes passed over the vegetation where Hathcock lay, and he saw nothing. Because Hathcock's ghillie suit, perfectly adapted to the local vegetation, combined with his absolute stillness, made him indistinguishable from the jungle floor. The soldier's eyes expected to see a human shape, expected to see movement. He saw only vegetation and shadow. The soldier moved on. The sweep continued for another hour, then withdrew. The NVA had searched the area and found nothing. At 1300 hours, traffic on the trail resumed. Soldiers began moving through again, more cautiously than before, but still using the route. Hathcock resumed his work. Over the remainder of that day, he engaged and killed 11 more NVA soldiers. Some were in groups, where he would rapidly engage multiple targets before survivors could react or identify his position. Others were individuals, easy shots that required only patience to wait for the perfect moment. His technique was methodical. Observe the target, calculate range and conditions. Wait for the target to be in the optimal position, typically when they were stationary or moving slowly. 1 shot, 1 kill. Immediate bolt cycle and scan for additional targets or threats. Then return to absolute stillness, becoming invisible again. By the time darkness fell on May 15th, Hathcock had 14 confirmed kills from his first hide position. Burke had verified each one through his spotting scope. 14 NVA soldiers had died on that trail, killed by a sniper they never saw, firing from a position they had literally walked past during their security sweep. That night, under cover of darkness, Hathcock and Burke relocated. They moved approximately 400 meters to a second pre-planned hide position along a different section of the trail network. The movement took 4 hours using the same slow crawl technique. They arrived at their new position at 200 hours and spent the remaining darkness preparing it. May 16th began with Hathcock in his new position. The NVA was now actively searching for the sniper who had killed 14 soldiers the previous day. They sent patrols. They altered their movement patterns. They increased security, but they were searching in the wrong areas, looking toward Marine lines, expecting the sniper to be operating from outside their perimeter. Hathcock was inside their perimeter, in a new position they had not yet searched, watching new trails they believed were secure. Over the course of May 16th, he achieved 21 confirmed kills. The NVA's security measures made no difference because those measures were based on the assumption that the sniper was where doctrine said he should be. May 17th, 18 confirmed kills from a third position. May 18th, 23 kills from a fourth position. May 19th, 17 kills from a position back near his original hide site, which the NVA had searched days earlier and now considered cleared. The NVA was experiencing casualties that made no tactical sense. Soldiers were dying on trails deep inside what should have been secure territory. The deaths came without warning, from an enemy who could not be found, could not be pinpointed, could not be engaged. Patrols would find bodies but no evidence of the shooter. Security sweeps would find nothing. The psychological impact was devastating. NVA soldiers became afraid to use the trails even deep in their own territory. Officers struggled to maintain discipline. Supply movements slowed because porters refused to move during daylight. Combat effectiveness of units in the sector degraded because soldiers who should have been fighting were instead conducting massive security operations, searching for one sniper. On May 19th, the NVA made the decision to commit a full company, over 100 soldiers, to hunting the sniper. They brought in trackers with dogs. They established observation posts on every trail. They conducted systematic sweeps of every possible position. The bounty was increased to $30,000, an enormous sum, offered for his death or capture. And still they did not find him, because Hathcock was not where they were looking. He was in positions they had already searched, or in positions so close to their own base areas that they never considered them as possible sniper hides. He was inside their decision cycle, anticipating their reactions, positioning himself in the gaps of their security. On the evening of May 19th, after 5 days in NVA territory, Hathcock and Burke extracted. They had accomplished 93 confirmed kills. They were nearly out of ammunition, critically low on water, and Hathcock assessed that the NVA security had finally become dense enough that continuing operations would shift the risk from acceptable to suicidal. They crawled back through NVA territory, through the security perimeter, back to Marine lines. The exfiltration took 8 hours. They arrived exhausted, dehydrated, covered in insect bites and jungle rot, but alive and undetected. Captain Land was waiting. He had received fragmentary reports of massive NVA casualties in the sector, of an enemy in disarray, of security operations that had shut down significant portions of the NVA logistics network. He had suspected Hathcock was responsible but had no confirmation until Hathcock reported. 93 confirmed kills, sir. Burke verified all of them. We operated from multiple positions inside enemy territory. No contact with friendly forces for 5 days as planned. Land stared at him. Inside enemy territory. How far inside? Varied, sir. Closest was approximately 400 meters from what we assessed was their battalion command post. Furthest was about 1,200 meters inside their perimeter. Land's response was immediate. You're never doing that again. Ever. You understand me? That was brilliant and suicidal, and I'm not losing my best sniper because he's decided to hunt from inside enemy base camps. Hathcock's response. Understood, sir. Land looked at him for a long moment. I'm putting you in for a Bronze Star, and I'm also officially ordering you no more operations inside enemy perimeters. You position from friendly territory. You extract to friendly territory. You do not position yourself where you cannot be extracted if things go wrong. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Land sighed. 93 confirmed in 5 days. That's going to rewrite the tactical manuals. That's going to become a case study. And it's also going to make you even more of a target for every NVA soldier in I-Corps. Watch yourself. What was the real secret to his success? How did one Marine achieve what should have been impossible? Killing 93 enemy soldiers while positioned in the worst possible tactical location. The answer lies in a combination of extraordinary fieldcraft, understanding of enemy psychology, willingness to violate doctrine when doctrine was inadequate, and patience that exceeded normal human capability. Post-war analysis by Marine Corps historians and by Vietnamese military historians who studied NVA records of the period revealed the full scope of what Hathcock had accomplished. His reverse positioning technique, operating from inside enemy security perimeters, had been so unexpected that the NVA never developed effective counter-tactics during the 5-day operation. The NVA records documented 93 casualties along the trail network in the Con Thien sector during the period May 15, 1967, matching Hathcock's confirmed kills. The records also documented the deployment of a company-sized force to hunt the sniper, the expansion of security operations, and the disruption to logistics operations. The economic cost to the NVA, accounting for lost supplies, diverted manpower, and degraded combat effectiveness, was estimated to be equivalent to a successful airstrike on a major base area. The psychological impact was even more significant. NVA soldiers who served in I-Corps during the period remembered the incident decades later. In interviews conducted in the 1990s, former NVA soldiers described the fear created by American snipers who could kill from impossible positions. One former NVA officer said, "We knew American snipers were skilled, but we believed we could defend against them with proper security and movement discipline. Then we had soldiers dying inside our own perimeter, killed by a sniper who we searched for but never found. It was terrifying because if you could die in what should be safe territory, then nowhere was safe." The Marine Corps, studying Hathcock's tactics, had a more conflicted response. His effectiveness was undeniable. His techniques demonstrated that unconventional positioning could produce extraordinary results, but the risk he had accepted was also undeniable. If the NVA had detected him, extraction would have been impossible, and his death or capture would have been certain. The official doctrine remained unchanged. Snipers operate from secure positions with viable extraction routes. But Hathcock's mission became a classified case study taught in advanced sniper courses, demonstrating that when conditions warranted, violations of doctrine could be justified if the sniper had the fieldcraft and psychological understanding to execute safely. The technique of reverse positioning, operating from inside enemy security perimeters, was used rarely by other snipers, but became part of the tactical toolkit for special operations forces. Modern special operations sniper training includes scenarios where operators must position themselves in enemy territory, and Hathcock's mission is studied as the foundational example of how to execute such operations. Carlos Hathcock continued to operate as a sniper in Vietnam until September 1969, when he was severely burned in a vehicle accident and medically evacuated. He eventually achieved 93 confirmed kills, though he always maintained that his actual total was over 300, with the difference being kills that could not be confirmed by witnesses. After recovering from his burns, he returned to the Marine Corps as a sniper instructor, where he developed and taught the Marine Sniper Training Program that still exists today. He retired in 1979 due to injuries sustained in Vietnam and died in 1999 at the age of 56 from multiple sclerosis, possibly related to his burn injuries. In interviews after the war, Hathcock was characteristically modest about his achievements. When asked about the 93 confirmed kills in 5 days, he would explain, "I was doing my job. My job was to kill enemy soldiers so they couldn't kill Marines. I positioned myself where I could do that most effectively. The fact that it was inside their territory was irrelevant. What mattered was that every NVA soldier I killed was one less threat to my fellow Marines." When pressed about whether he felt his reverse positioning technique was worth the risk, his response was telling. "Every time I went into the jungle, there was risk. The question wasn't whether there was risk, but whether the risk was justified by the results." 93 enemy soldiers killed, significant disruption to their operations, no Marine casualties. Yes, the risk was justified. The North Vietnamese army never forgot him. After the war, in Vietnamese military histories of the conflict, Hathcock is mentioned specifically as one of the most dangerous American soldiers they faced. One Vietnamese account describes him as the ghost sniper who hunted from impossible positions and who we never captured despite our best efforts. Today, the Winchester Model 70 rifle Hathcock used is displayed at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia. Next to it is a ghillie suit similar to the one he wore, though not the original, which was destroyed during his burn incident. A placard describes his service. Staff Sergeant Carlos Hathcock, 93 confirmed kills, Vietnam War. Known for unconventional tactics, including operating from positions inside enemy territory. At the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at Quantico, a memorial board lists legendary Marine snipers and their achievements. Hathcock's entry is simple. SS Git Carlos Hathcock, 93 confirmed kills in 5 days. Con Thien Sector, May 15, 1967. Technique: reverse positioning inside enemy perimeter. In the classroom where fieldcraft and stalking are taught, there is a photograph of jungle terrain with a circle marking where Hathcock had positioned himself during one of his hide positions. The photograph was taken years after the war, but the position is still identifiable. Students are asked to identify the position in the photograph. Most cannot see it even with the circle marked. The instructor's point is simple. This is what perfect camouflage looks like. This is the standard you're trying to achieve. If the enemy cannot see you even when looking directly at your position, then your fieldcraft is adequate. It is a reminder that sometimes the most important skill is not the ability to shoot accurately, but the ability to hide perfectly in impossible places. That doctrine is a guideline, not a law, and sometimes violating doctrine is what the mission requires. That the safest position is not always the one farthest from the enemy, but sometimes the one closest, where they never think to look. 93 confirmed kills, 5 days, inside enemy territory. One sniper who understood that the best place to hunt the tiger is not from outside the jungle, but from inside the tiger's own den. The Marine who proved that sometimes the craziest hiding trick is hiding where the enemy knows you cannot possibly be, because that certainty makes them blind to your presence. The reverse positioning technique that should have gotten him killed, but instead made him the most feared American in I Corps. The sniper the NVA spent 100 soldiers and $30,000 trying to kill and never found. One Winchester Model 70, one ghillie suit covered in jungle vegetation, one commitment to absolute stillness measured in hours, one willingness to position 30 meters from enemy forces and trust that perfect camouflage and perfect patience would render him invisible, and 93 North Vietnamese Army soldiers who died never knowing where the bullets came from, killed by a ghost who hunted from inside their own lines and who vanished without trace every time they searched for him. The farm boy from Arkansas who became a legend by understanding that sometimes the most deadly weapon is not the rifle in your hands, but the audacity to position yourself where no sane person would ever go.